Have you ever wondered why some people view morality as a ladder to climb, while others see it as a web that connects us all? Picture this. A young person questioning their faith struggles between their religious leader's authority and their own evolving beliefs about right and wrong. It's a tension as old as humanity itself, and today we're going to decode it. Welcome back to Cyberspace, where we dive deep into the psychology that shapes our lives. I'm your host, Leslie Poston. Today, we're tackling something that affects every decision you make, every relationship you build, and every conflict you face: your moral compass. But here's the thing, that compass might not point in the same direction for everyone. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, a teenager decides not to cheat on a test because they're afraid of getting caught. In the second, another teenager makes the same choice, but because they believe cheating violates their personal values. Same action, same end result, completely different motivations. This is just one example of how complex our moral landscape can be. Today, we're going to explore two fascinating dimensions of morality that shape how we navigate right and wrong: vertical versus horizontal morality, and intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. These concepts might sound academic, but I promise you'll start seeing them everywhere, from your family dynamics to your workplace relationships, and even in the headlines that you read every day. Let's start with a story that might sound familiar. Sarah works at a tech company where she discovers her supervisor is quietly taking credit for her team's ideas. The old school part of her thinks, well, they're my boss. Maybe this is just how things work. But another part of her believes this violates the basic principles of fairness among colleagues. This internal conflict perfectly illustrates the tension between vertical and horizontal morality. Vertical morality is all about hierarchy. It's the voice in your head that says respect your elders or follow the chain of command. Think about traditional family structures, religious institutions, or military organizations. In all of these systems, moral behavior often means showing proper deference to authority and fulfilling your duties based on your position in the hierarchy. But here's where it gets interesting. Our modern world is increasingly embracing horizontal morality, where ethical behavior is based on mutual respect and equality between peers. Think about how workplace cultures have evolved from rigid hierarchies to more collaborative environments, or how parenting styles have shifted from "because I said so" to explaining and discussing rules with children. The really fascinating part: most of us carry both of these systems within us, often without realizing it. That's why you might feel conflicted when your boss asks you to do something you disagree with, or when your personal values clash with your family's traditions. Let's break down what's really happening here and dive deeper into the science behind these moral frameworks. What did I mean about hierarchy versus mutual respect in moral structures? Vertical morality refers to a moral framework where hierarchies and authority figures play a critical role. It emphasizes duty and responsibility to those above or below us in the social hierarchy. This can be seen in traditional family structures, religious practices, and even corporate environments. On the other hand, horizontal morality emphasizes equality and mutual respect among individuals at the same level. This is evident in democratic governance systems, peer-to-peer interactions, and collaborative work environments. The psychological underpinnings of these moral orientations can be linked back to developmental theories. Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development, for instance, suggests that our progression from obedience to authority, a vertical orientation, to social contracts and universal ethical principles, more horizontal in nature, mirrors our cognitive and ethical maturation. These stages indicate a movement from an externally imposed morality to a more reasoned, internalized form of ethical understanding. Culturally, these moral orientations can vary significantly. Haidt and colleagues' moral foundations theory suggests that different cultures prioritize different moral foundations. For example, societies with strong emphasis on respect for authority and purity typically exhibit a stronger vertical moral alignment, while those valuing harm prevention and fairness tend to favor horizontal moral structures. These orientations not only dictate social norms, but also influence individual psychological experiences, affecting everything from conflict resolution styles to personal well being. Empirical studies provide insight into how those moral frameworks are operationalized across societies. For example, one cross cultural study examined how respect for authority varied across 50 countries and found significant variations that could be predicted by underlying socioeconomics and cultural factors. These findings underscore the adaptability and diversity of moral systems and their deep psychological and social roots. Now, let's dig deeper into what actually motivates our moral choices. Picture two volunteers at a local food bank. James volunteers because it looks good on his resume and his company gives time off for community service. Maria volunteers because she genuinely believes in helping others and feels fulfilled by the work. Both are doing good, but their motivations couldn't be more different. This brings us to intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is like having an internal compass. You do the right thing because it aligns with your core values, regardless of whether anyone's watching. It's the kind of motivation that makes someone return a lost wallet, even when no one would know if they kept it. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is driven by external factors: rewards, punishments, social approval, or legal requirements. It's why many of us drive the speed limit even when we're running late, or why businesses might adopt environmental practices to attract conscious consumers. And here's what's fascinating about these two systems. Research shows that while both can effectively guide behavior, intrinsic motivation tends to be more stable and leads to greater psychological well-being. But here's the catch: we actually need both. A society can't function solely on intrinsic motivation. We need laws, rules, and social norms to maintain order. From a developmental perspective, the roots of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations in moral behavior can be traced back to early life experiences. According to self-determination theory, environments that support autonomy, competence, and relatedness foster intrinsic motivation. This theory suggests that when children are raised in supportive environments that model moral behaviors as inherently rewarding, they in turn are more likely to develop intrinsic moral motivations themselves. Psychological research has linked intrinsic moral motivations to better mental health outcomes. Studies have found that individuals with higher intrinsic morality report greater life satisfaction and lower stress levels. This connection is thought to be due to the alignment of actions with deeply held values, which reinforces a sense of self-integrity and reduces internal conflict. Extrinsically motivated individuals might change their behaviors based on the context, especially if external rewards or punishments are altered. This variability can lead to inconsistent moral behavior, which has been studied in organizational and political settings. Research demonstrates that extrinsic rewards can undermine intrinsic motivation in ethical decision-making, leading to behavior that is less consistent and potentially less ethical. We can see some examples of this conflict in recent United States politics, as conservatives trend towards a vertical morality with extrinsic motivations, and progressives trend toward a horizontal morality with intrinsic motivations. No group is a monolith, but this can give us some clues. Let's get nerdy for a moment and look at what's happening in your brain during moral decisions. Imagine you're on a crowded subway and you see someone drop their wallet. In the split second before you act, your brain launches into an incredibly complex dance. The emotional centers of your brain light up first. Maybe you feel empathy for the person who lost their wallet, or anxiety about speaking up in front of strangers. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, think of it as your brain's CEO, is rapidly calculating consequences. Will you miss your stop if you help? What if someone else picks up the wallet first? What would you want someone to do if it was your wallet? This mental choreography happens so fast you might not even notice it, but it's influenced by everything from your childhood experiences to your current stress levels. It's why the same person might make different moral choices when they're rushed, hungry, or under pressure. While this split-second decision might seem simple, scientists have uncovered incredible complexity in how our brains process these moral choices. Let's give it some context from research. Moral decision-making involves complex cognitive processes that engage various brain regions. Neuroimaging studies show that the prefrontal cortex plays a crucial role in moral reasoning, particularly in situations involving conflicts between your personal beliefs, personal benefits, and moral norms. This area of the brain helps us evaluate the consequences of our actions and control impulsive behaviors. Emotions deeply influence our moral decisions. Empathy, for example, can drive us to make sacrifices for others, while guilt and shame can deter us from actions that would harm others or violate social norms. Research has demonstrated how empathy leads to more altruistic behaviors, highlighting the emotional underpinnings of horizontal morality. The integration of cognitive and emotional factors leads to diverse behavioral outcomes in moral decision-making. Studies have shown that when individuals are presented with moral dilemmas, their decisions can vary significantly depending on their dominant moral framework, vertical or horizontal, and whether their motivations tend to be intrinsic or extrinsic. This variability underscores the complexity of predicting moral behavior based solely on observable factors. Now, let's talk about what happens when different moral systems clash, because this is where things get really interesting. Think about a family business where the younger generation wants to implement more democratic decision-making processes, while the older generation believes in maintaining strict hierarchical control. Or consider international businesses trying to navigate different cultural expectations about authority and equality. These conflicts aren't just academic. They can create real psychological stress. Imagine being raised in a culture that emphasizes respect for authority and then working in a tech startup that values challenging ideas regardless of who presents them. That kind of moral code switching can be exhausting. But here's the hopeful part. Understanding these different moral frameworks can actually help us bridge these gaps. When we recognize that someone might be operating from a different moral framework rather than just being difficult or being wrong, it opens up new possibilities for understanding and compromise. These conflicts show up everywhere, but what's particularly interesting is what psychologists have learned about managing the clashes. Understanding and navigating the conflicts requires psychological strategies that promote empathy and perspective taking. Research suggests that interventions focusing on mutual respect and understanding can help bridge gaps between differing moral systems. For example, educational programs that expose students to various moral perspectives can reduce conflicts and promote more harmonious social interactions. Let's talk about how we're shaping the moral landscape for future generations. Schools are fascinating laboratories for moral development. Some educational systems emphasize obedience and respect for authority, while others focus on critical thinking and questioning established norms. I recently observed a fascinating program where high school students were given real ethical dilemmas to solve, everything from environmental challenges to social media privacy issues. What made it special was how it combined both vertical elements, learning from experts and established wisdom, with horizontal ones, peer discussion and collaborative problem solving. What makes these educational approaches so effective isn't just intuition. It's based on solid psychological research. Let's look at what studies have revealed about how moral education actually works. Education plays a pivotal role in shaping these moral frameworks. Schools not only impart knowledge, but also socialize students into particular moral viewpoints and moral behaviors. Curriculums that emphasize critical thinking and ethical reasoning can help students develop a balanced understanding of both vertical and horizontal moralities. Successful education programs often include components that foster intrinsic motivation and ethical reasoning. For example, service learning programs that integrate community service with classroom instruction can enhance students' moral development by providing real-world applications of ethical concepts. These programs highlight the effectiveness of experiential learning in building both intrinsic and extrinsic moral motivations. Knowing this, we get a clearer picture of why education is so often such a battleground politically. We can't overlook that we're living through a fascinating experiment in moral psychology thanks to technology right now. Social media has created entirely new moral dilemmas. Is it okay to share a friend's photo without asking? How unethical is it to film yourself doing acts of performative charity without the consent of the recipients? How do you balance privacy with transparency? Should you call out bad behavior online? What's particularly interesting is how these platforms are changing the way moral ideas spread. A video about ethical consumption can go viral and influence millions overnight. But this speed and reach can also amplify moral outrage to a point where we only encounter people who share our moral framework. These new digital dilemmas have sparked fascinating research into how technology is reshaping the moral landscape. Moral psychology is rapidly evolving with new research exploring the integration of neuroscience, behavioral economics, and evolutionary psychology. Innovations in neuroimaging allow researchers to observe the brain in action during moral decision-making, providing deeper insights into the cognitive processes involved. Studies suggest a move towards understanding how genetic factors and neural circuits influence moral cognition and variability in moral judgments across different contexts. Technology, and particularly social media, has introduced new dynamics to moral psychology by influencing how moral ideas are shared and perceived. The speed and reach of digital communication can amplify moral messages, but also lead to the rapid spread of moral outrage or misinformation. Future research is looking at how digital environments affect our moral development and what this means for future generations. A recent notable study highlighted how online interactions can both positively and negatively affect our sense of morality and ethical behaviors. As society faces complex global challenges like climate change and social inequality, moral psychology can provide critical insight into how people's moral frameworks can adapt to promote more cooperative and sustainable behaviors. Upcoming studies are focused on how moral innovations, such as global citizenship concepts, can be encouraged through education and policymaking. So, how do we use all of this knowledge in our daily lives? Start by becoming aware of your own moral frameworks. Next time you make a decision, ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or am I doing this because of external pressure? Am I responding to hierarchy or treating this as a peer relationship? Understanding these distinctions can be incredibly powerful in both personal and professional settings. It can help you communicate better with family members who might operate from a different moral framework or navigate workplace dynamics more effectively. Understanding the concepts of vertical and horizontal, intrinsic and extrinsic morality and motivations can help individuals better navigate their relationships and workplace dynamics. For example, recognizing when a conflict is a result of differing moral frameworks can lead to a more empathetic resolution. Practical tips for listeners might include reflective practices like journaling or mindfulness, which can help integrate these insights into everyday decision-making. These personal insights aren't just helpful in our daily life, they're transforming how professionals approach therapy and counseling. In therapy and counseling, understanding a client's moral orientation can guide approaches to treatment and to conflict resolution. Therapists can use these concepts to help clients explore the roots of their moral beliefs and how these influence their interpersonal relationships and self-concept. Workshops or therapy groups that focus on moral development can be particularly effective in settings where community and communication are key. As we wrap up today's journey through the moral maze, remember that none of these systems, vertical or horizontal, intrinsic or extrinsic, is inherently better than the others. What matters is understanding how they work together to shape our behavior and to shape society. As we close, I encourage each of you to reflect on your own moral beliefs. Are they more vertical or horizontal, driven by intrinsic values or extrinsic reward? Understanding these dimensions about yourself can empower us to lead more thoughtful and ethical lives. And the next time you find yourself in a moral dilemma, try to notice which frameworks and which past experiences are influencing your thinking. This awareness alone can help you make more conscious, deliberate choices about how you want to show up in the world. Thanks for listening to Cyberspace. This is your host, Leslie Poston, signing off. Until next time, keep working to understand why we do what we do and stay curious.